Did the United States Navy blow up the Nord Stream gas pipeline? Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. This is another declaration of truth from your host, Terry A. Hurlbut. Last fall, I told you about the sudden failure of the Nord Stream pipeline. That pipeline brought natural gas from Russia to Germany. Everyone knew it was sabotage, and at least some accused the United States. Now, reporter and historian Seymour Hersh accuses the United States Navy of the sabotage. Twitter reporter Kanekoa the Great is on the case, along with Matt Taibbi, has links to Hersh's article and to many other sources to corroborate Sy Hersh's article, or at least to set the stage. I've left a link in the description to Sy Hersh's article, and we'll have a lot more to share. Before I do want to shout out to the prime sponsor of this channel, which is Conservative News and Views. Link in the description. Be sure to check out the awesome CNAV Store. Scroll down near the bottom for that link. Lots of great merchandise there, especially this t-shirt that I have chosen for today, which reads, 1984 was not an instruction manual. Only this time, I'm not going to talk about the Ministry of Truth. No. The analog here is the Ministry of War. And its message, we have always been at war with East Asia. One more thing. If you like this video, or like what you're about to hear, you can like this video. You can also click the bell icon to get a notice every time I come out with a new one. In fact, you see the new icon, the heart shape with the US dollar sign embedded in it? That's the super thanks icon. If you really want to keep this video coming, these videos coming, click that and leave me a tip. Any currency will do, as long as it's legal tender. First, some review. On or about Monday, September 26, 2022, pressures in the Nord Stream pipeline under the Baltic Sea dropped to zero. Then on the evening of September 27th, we found out why. 3 leaks had sprung in that pipeline, 2 in the original project, Nord Stream 1, and 1 in the newer project, Nord Stream 2. Swedish and Danish seismologists said flatly that 2 explosions occurred on the Baltic Sea floor. The explosions happened several hours apart, and a large gas plume formed in the Baltic Sea. The Swedes ordered all ships to steer clear. Then, Reuters and the Associated Press carried Swedish and Danish accusations, respectively, of sabotage. Why did the Norwegians say anything? Stay tuned. The Washington Post accused the Russians of blowing up their own pipeline. National Review's Jim Garratti positively gloated over it. But Tucker Carlson accused the United States, and I have a link in the description to Gateway Pundit's segment in which Tucker Carlson said that straight out. In contrast, Redux, member of the European Parliament, accused the United States. No, not accused. Thanked the United States for, in his view, striking at the enemy of the European Union. But now, his thread has vanished. His account is still active, which indicates one thing. Radek Sikorsky deleted the thread. Whether at the behest of the U.S. State Department or because he thought better of trumpeting that act, who knows. His content clearly shows him to be a war hawk and thoroughly anti-Russian. But perhaps it occurred to him, or someone told him, to hush up American involvement. Neither he nor any other anti-Russian partisan can hush it up any longer. Matt Taibbi weighed in first. At 7:15 a.m. Eastern Time, he shared the first tweet of Sy Hersh's article. I have a link to that tweet in the description. The next tweet you'll see is mine. I said then what I'm going to say to you now. I knew that when it happened. Who else had motive, opportunity, and method? In fact, one user, answering me back, professed surprise that Ukraine and NATO weren't thanking the USA. Another user replied back that they were and are. I have a link to his tweet, which we'll reproduce the first, as Twitter usually does. True, the man offered no sources, but let's not forget Radek Sikorski's expressions of thanks. So if NATO wasn't thanking him, the European Parliament was. Another user flatly discounted the Sy Hersh article because it cited an anonymous source. So I asked him, again, to tell me who else had motive, opportunity, and method. I have a link in the description to my tweet asking him that. As of this recording, he has not answered me back. And I challenge him to answer. He knows who he is. Still another user observed that Sy Hersh says that the Americans worked it out with the Norwegians. I have a link to his tweet. And in fact, that would explain why the cries of sabotage came from Sweden and Denmark, but not Norway. Then, Kanekoa the Great dropped his 17-tweet thread. In it, he covered more than the Nord Stream pipeline. He reviewed the full history of American involvement in Ukraine, including the Maidan Revolution of 2014. He did not, however, address the suspicion of biological weapons development laboratories in Ukraine with American funding, direction, and staff. I have left the odd-numbered tweet links in the description so you can follow this. I urge you to click through. There are lots of very interesting links and embeds, including video. So here is the text. Quote, last June the Navy divers operating under the cover of a widely publicized midsummer NATO exercise known as Balt Ops 22 planted the remotely triggered explosives that, unquote, Sy Hersh, as quoted by Matt Taibbi. You hear that? Last June. That means they planted those bombs then and were ready to trigger them 3 months later. Next, we have a transcript. Biden. If Russia invades, there will no longer be a Nord Stream 2. We will bring an end to it. Reporter. But how will you do that exactly since the project is in Germany's control? Biden, I promise you we will be able to do that. February 7th, 2022. 2 weeks and 3 days before Russia's special military op began. Then another video in which Victoria Nuland says, quote, if Russia invades Ukraine, one way or another, Nord Stream 2 will not move forward. Next is the Tucker Carlson segment I linked to earlier. Tucker Carlson says, quote, if you were Vladimir Putin, you would have to be a suicidal moron to blow up your own energy pipelines. Natural gas pipelines are the main source of your power and your wealth, and most critically, your leverage over other countries. Europe needs your energy, close quote. The CIA warned authorities in Berlin 3 months before the Nord Stream pipeline was sabotaged of the possibility that someone would destroy the pipelines. I wonder how they knew. Well, hey, remember, the first tweet says that the divers planted those bombs in June. September is 3 months away. Well, there you go. Kanekoa continues. The people who told you Iraq has weapons of mass destruction want you to believe Russia blew up its own pipeline. The U.S. government previously lied Americans into war using the Gulf of Tonkin, USS Maine, RMS Lusitania, Iraqi incubator babies, and weapons of mass destruction. But trust them this time. The gas pipelines were sabotaged near Bornholm in the Baltic Sea. The leaks occurred in areas where the pipelines are at sufficiently shallow depths for divers to plant explosives. The U.S. Navy and NATO held a major maritime training exercise in the Baltic Sea involving scores of Allied ships throughout the region. The event was held off the coast of Bornholm Island and involved teams of divers who happened to be planting and locating explosives. The U.S. Navy posted pictures of themselves planting mock explosives in the Baltic Sea, where the pipelines would explode 3 months later. But don't worry, it was a training exercise. Uncle Joe, the climate warrior, would never blow up a natural gas pipeline in the ocean, right? If Joe truly cared, his son Hunter wouldn't be invested in the world's worst polluting Chinese government-owned oil, gas, and coal companies. Professor Jeffrey Sachs caused chaos on Bloomberg for suggesting the U.S. government was behind the Nord Stream sabotage. He said, quote, "The destruction of the Nord Stream pipeline, which I would bet was a U.S. action," unquote, Professor Sachs. Next, two videos featuring Joe Rogan and a comedian named David Smith. In one, Rogan and Smith break down the reasons Russia invaded Ukraine. Quote, "The most important priority in the history of humanity is that America and Russia do not go to war," close quote. Next, Rogan and Smith break down the Obama administration overthrowing Ukraine's government. Quote, "All these Soros-funded NGOs funded the militias on the ground. There's a tape of Victoria Nuland talking about who would be the next government. We overthrew their government," close quote. Let me remind you, George Soros is persona non grata in Russia. The Obama administration overthrew Ukraine's elected government in 2014. John McCain rallied protesters and Victoria Nuland was caught on tape planning Ukraine's new government. What role did this have on the current NATO proxy war in Ukraine? After the U.S. overthrew Ukraine's government in 2014, 96% of Luhansk and 89% of Donetsk voted to secede from Ukraine. The West said the elections were illegitimate, but the eastern half of Ukraine typically votes for pro-Russia candidates. This tweet has a map showing pro-Russia areas in blue, pro-West areas in red. The blue and red correspond roughly to the current battlefront. If the military-industrial complex sabotaged Nord Stream, says Kanekoa, it would be one of the craziest, most destructive terrorist acts any American administration has ever done. Blowing up a gas pipeline to Europe during an energy crisis and escalating a war with nuclear-armed Russia. Jimmy Dore says, quote, "Your enemy is not China, your enemy is not Russia, your enemy is the military-industrial complex," close quote. The bottom line is there will be no world left for our children if this war between nuclear superpowers continues to escalate. End of thread. Before I get to the reaction, I want to shout out to a sponsor who can really help you through the economic storms to come. That sponsor is oursilverlines.com. Do you feel like you're working harder for your money just to get by? You are not alone. The fluctuating economy, employment issues, and unexpected changes in life have left many families struggling over the past few years. Collecting gold and silver can help shield you against many of these challenges. But if you're like me many years ago, you don't know where or how to start. Our Silver Lines helps by connecting you with thousands of members who are learning the secrets to creating and protecting true wealth by collecting precious metals. Whether you just want to collect rare and unique coins or take advantage of the business opportunities this company provides, they can help you learn to live an exceptional life. Visit oursilverlines.com to learn how you can build a legacy for your future. Most of the reaction consisted of outrage and worry about nuclear combat between America and Russia. I have links to 7 tweets that will give you a fair sample of the outrage. One user says, quote, "Put those criminals behind bars, they censored doctors and that caused millions of people to die," close quote. Another says, "This is an act of war against Russia," and then someone else reminds him that technically it is an act of war against Germany. But it really made life difficult for a lot of people in a lot of countries. I'm bowdlerizing here. Bear that in mind if you follow the link to the tweet. Someone else says the obvious. Something warm and sticky and smelly is about to hit the fan. Then, and there's this, we all know who did this. They can lie like always, But we know. Someone else asked the pertinent question, how is this legal? Then, here's an interesting passage. Biden, B-U-Y, is trying to start World War III. And then we have someone calling this disgraceful. But at least one user expressed skepticism. He tweets out a graphic of a Russian emblem with a swastika embedded in it. I think somebody's got his Godwinian metaphors mixed up. All right, let's analyze. First of all, that business with the United States ship Maine, going back to the Spanish-American War, well, if that's the general consensus today, the Maine blew up because some careless sailor started a fire in a paint locker, and the crew hadn't closed any of the water tank doors. And the man who really blew matters out of proportion was William Randolph Hearst. You provide the poetry, I'll provide the war, he said, as Orson Welles would portray him as saying in his film Citizen Kane. But it likely never occurred to Welles that a deep state might have existed even then, and Hearst was just a willing dupe, a useful idiot. I'd like to call right now for an investigation. Any of you chairmen of departments of history, if you really want to make a splash, investigate that, why don't you? And the Royal Merchant ship Lusitania, that ship was running guns. We do have the log of a U-boat that shot 2 torpedoes into her. But the real fault lay with the ocean line officials who didn't tell the passengers that they would be aboard a ship that would be fair game. Kanekoa shared a lot of videos that you can see if you click through. But in addition to that, let's consider Sy Hersh's own statements on why the current administration disliked that pipeline, or rather why the deep state did not like Nord Stream. Hersh observed correctly that the Biden administration did not want Germany to have cheap gas from Russia. But this same administration already planned to cut off cheap gas from and in the United States. So the real reason for American opposition to Nord Stream was the use of fossil fuels. The deep state opposed the pipeline then because the globe is warming, the globe is warming. Planning on how to destroy Nord Stream began in December of 2021, 2 months before the Russian special military operation. Then Biden issued this threat: if the Russians invade Ukraine, Nord Stream 2 will not move forward. I have a link in the description to video of him making that very threat. Nord Stream did move forward, and for that reason, so did the plan. And how did Norway come into it? By passing a new defense agreement extending American jurisdiction in key areas, and by lending their own naval support, especially under the sea. No wonder the Norwegians said nothing while the Swedes and the Danes cried foul. Biden obviously carried out his threat, but Congress never once declared war. Now think about what that means. For one thing, those divers are liable for leaving a remote-controlled bomb on an enemy asset without cause. Oh yes, they were given an order. Well, let's quote actor Kevin Pollak as Lieutenant Junior Grade Sam Weinberg, USN, in A Few Good Men, directed by Rob Reiner. Yes, that Rob Reiner. Quote, an argument that didn't work for Lieutenant Calley and Me Lai, an argument that didn't work for the National Socialists at Nuremberg. Hey Rob, did you ever think it would be a lefty giving unlawful orders when you made that film? Huh? And what does that say about the position of the American people? Joe Biden has already gotten us into an undeclared war against Russia. If Kanekoa is right, Jimmy Dore is right, your enemy is not Russia, and it is not China either, balloon or no balloon. Your enemy is the military-industrial complex. And more than that, it is the deep state, who are provoking a devastating war as a means toward population reduction. Now some of you, when I mentioned a rocket scientist named Robert Duncan Ensman a few weeks ago, might have thought I was going off on a tangent. This is no tangent. This is exactly what Dr. Ensman warned us about. All you people who voted for Biden in 2020, Ossoff and Warnock in J5 2021, and John Fetterman in 2022, this is what you voted for. Does that make you proud? What it ought to make you do, I may not say. I'm still going to keep it family friendly. And Speaker McCarthy, if I were you, I'd take that Ukraine-colored handkerchief out of your pocket. You got to ask yourself whether this is what you signed on to. I speak to Republicans and Democrats alike. Think about what has just happened on your watch. Links in the description of the article, to Sy Hersh's article, to Tucker Carlson's accusation video, to Matt Taibbi's tweet and 4 tweets in reaction, to Kanekoa the Great's thread, to 7 tweets expressing outrage, 1 expressing skepticism, to Joe Biden's threat video, to my Declarations of Truth Twitter account, and to Conservative News and Views. I've also sent links to the awesome CNAV Store and our silverlines.com, as I also mentioned. You know already about how to like a video, turn on notifications, and leave a tip. On the end screen, I'm going to leave a subscribe link to my channel and links to the Ukraine playlist and both those other videos that I mentioned. This is Terry A. Hurlbut delivering another declaration of truth and reminding you to let the truth set you free.